I love fast forwarding the countdown like that.
Sometimes you forget to click a button. That's it. All part of building in public, right?
Totally.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the first of two LinkedIn Live sessions with Empathy this week. So the first one that we have today is with Empathy and Space Heater AI. So today I am joined by the three co-founders, Alex Barrett, Ben Cooper, and Angel Maldonado, who is also our CEO and founder of Empathy. So that said, take it away. Let's hear about what's changed since we saw you guys last a couple of weeks ago.
Hey, thank you so much. It's awesome to be back here so quickly and just have the chance to talk a little bit about what we're doing. 2 weeks ago, we did our first kind of scramble to demo live in public what we're building with Space Heater. And I think just to kind of recap on where we were looking at bringing in data into a contextual space for users that allows them to leverage their data within their own sphere of privacy. And some of the technologies that we talked about, retrieval augmented generation, and some of the techniques that we're using to call APIs. So last week we had a demo and we're pulling in this giant blob of text that was kind of overwhelming and hard to digest. So Ben, I don't know if you want to pull up the demo here of where we are this week. We've made some progress on various fronts, and we can kind of talk about what's changed, where we're going with this, and some of the vision that we have for the future. So Ben, yeah, why don't you take over a
Great.
little bit and you can tell them what we did?
Yeah, so absolutely. So if you joined us for our last LinkedIn Live, we have our same screen here, just demoing. As you can see, though, we're getting much better formatted Markdown. Before, as Alex mentioned, we were getting just a blob of text that was frankly unreadable. So now it's actually formatting on the fly from the LLM. And then on our front end, it's actually taking those Markdown and converting it to HTML and displaying it as that. So you can see nice bold, nice line breaks, all that good stuff. So that's a much better experience for the user to be able to parse and digest all that information. Also, too, what we've changed from last time, as you'll see here, we got our top 3 suggested API endpoints from the Empathy Stats API that is relevant to our user query here. And then what happens now is that we have a much better data here to format what we're actually querying. So this looks maybe a little choppy here. All these backslash and then quotes, those are just escaping the quotes, but you can see some of the attributes here. And you'll notice some of these parameters like mandatory false. And what that does is dynamically formulate the query parameters of the endpoint. So you can see basically for this query to get these results here, we're hitting this endpoint here. So the instance of the shop, we're hitting this top products API endpoint that you can see here, and then dynamically inserting the dates, and then also to the sort field and the ascending. So this works much better now. We ingested all of the API endpoints in the Empathy Stats API. So now we are able to just query whatever endpoint that our LLM suggests to us by dynamically putting these together, and then we get the results here. One challenge we did, yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, sorry. Ben, I thought that was a great explanation. I wanted to just kind of add for people that might not be so technical what this all kind of means in the purpose of trying to get data from an API that's digestible for a user. And so really what this is allowing us to do is in the case of Backroom, what we're setting this up for, they have a lot of different statistic endpoints that relate to how their shops are run and things that their shop owners might want to leverage in terms of add to cart data or what keywords are being used. And so what this allows us to provide for them is basically they can, in natural language, ask questions about things that might pertain to their shop And we're able to use a RAG and an LLM to pick the right data to pull in and then let the LLM explain it to the user in a formatting that we choose. And so one of the things we kind of glossed over it pretty quickly as far as the formatting that's there, and you can just see it's pretty basic stuff right now, like bullet points and that sort of thing. But certain queries will return tables that are formatted. And I don't know if maybe you can ask that same question. We'll see if it works. It doesn't always, curse of the demo, sometimes it doesn't always work. But let's say, tell me about recent product interactions using a table. And let's see if the LLM can figure that out. Perfect. So as you can see, we've got a nicely formatted table coming into the view here and just really providing some rich data for a potential shop owner. And again, this is all in Spanish. The shop is Bici Clásica in Spain, and awesome bike shop out there. But this is giving some real-time data back to the shop owner about what's going on in their store right now in the last 7 days. And so you can imagine down the road, we're going to enable businesses or host sites to format their data and anticipate their data coming back in various ways and formatting it and representing it in different style components that are all relevant to their site and their content. And so that's one of the things that we think will be really interesting around spaces and the config that you can customize for your space when a user comes and interacts with it. So just wanted to add that real quick, Ben. And I think, as far as what you were talking about, concatenating the API query strings and dynamically generating those, I think that's a great place to take it to the next part where we talk about basically how we're going to leverage LLMs to decide, is this an API query or is there other RAG accessible contextual data? So what we like to call them artifacts, but basically that's data that's available to the environment that you're talking to this AI in, that could either be personal data that you bring into the space under your sphere of privacy, or it could be data that is available to the space by the host site or host organization, such as like a product catalog or potential user experience flows that we want the model to represent as the user interacts with it.
Absolutely. And one other thing, one challenge we did face with this was some of the documentation was a little outdated as far as some of the required parameters for these endpoints. And so it was just one of the challenges about getting the information in needing to be good so we get the proper results going out, because we didn't want to hit anything where it was looking for a start date or for a seasonal search, if it was looking for a keyword like Christmas or Thanksgiving or something like that, and it wasn't provided. So just basically we had to just make sure the data that were coming in and the documentation is appropriate so we can get all the information we need to formulate these API queries.
Yeah, and some of the things that we might do in the future for things that might have dynamic parameters where it's really up to a keyword of a user, like what kind of information they're looking for from the API, is looking at logic that we can use with the LLM to inject those parameters properly into the API to get the right data back. Another thing that we're running into that's a challenge, as we like to talk about building in public, is this is a topic that a lot of businesses are dealing with right now, which is your context window and also token usage and cost. And so when you talk to these LLMs, each word or fragment of a word is considered a token. And that definitely has a cost associated with it when you serve models like this. And so one of the things we run into from a technical standpoint of the limitations of the context window, as well as the cost, is these sometimes could be massive responses from the API about, for example, like, there might be an endpoint that says all of the keywords that were used within a store and how they, the relevancy and so 27,000 character or tokens long kind of context. And so as you can imagine, that could add up really quick as far as like a bill for running an LLM. And so we need to look at ways to crunch that down and then feed it into the system to basically bring back the right data and the right response without going overboard and putting a bunch of stuff in that kind of really jacks up the cost. So let's see, where are we on this? Let's basically this is the next demo here. So what we did with all of that, so you can kind of see how it might be in practice in the real world, we've put that into a widget. So this would be an embeddable iframe that's available to be injected into any host site. And so right now we're running it on.
Shout out to Pablo and the Visible Privacy team with the great consent management tools that we have here.
Oh yeah,
Sorry, Alex.
absolutely. No worries. So here we've got our widget running on our space capsule site, which is going to be the portal for end users to leverage their data and see what kind of LLMs they've interacted with in different spaces. But we've now got our widget, and this is still connected to Visa Classica. So we're actually pulling in Visa Classica data. So it's a little bit of a confusing experience here because this has nothing to do with Space Capsule other than we're demoing the widget. But anyway, as you can see, we've got this iframe running, and um, a lot of people look at iframes and think, oh, well, that's an older technology. Why don't you inject this directly into the site using JavaScript and have it be a component running on the host site? And this isn't going to be the only way we do this, but this highlights a really important part of what we're trying to accomplish with Space Heater, and that is that we want to provide this blind experience to the host site. So where a user can interact with their data, their prompting, and get responses from an LLM in the sphere of their own privacy and control, and then decide what they need to pass through to the host site. And basically giving them a way to leverage AI in a way that was never really possible before outside of the scope of your own sphere of privacy using a personal agent. And so as you can imagine, you might not actually have access to the host site's data in your own personal environment. So we're kind of marrying the two together and creating this middle ground of control and privacy for the user.
Yeah.
So
And just one
go ahead,
challenge,
Ben.
real quick, with this is just like Alex mentioned with the iframes passing the data back and forth. And as far as authentication, so our system knows what user is actually talking and what authorizations they have with the host site. So just as far as passing back and forth OAuth tokens, which is just a standard of authorization, or passing a token that is authorized on the host site, just stuff like that. So we know exactly who the user is, that in fact they are allowed to do those actions, and then what context and what store, what anything that they're actually operating in. So that's just one challenge with that. So yeah, so we can kind of show you the implementation within Motive here, what that actually all looks like in a real use case here. So here is back
Ben.
room. Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say here's the back room of the BC Classica shop here, and you can see the really cool their analytics as far as clicks, add to carts, etc., the user stock, the stock of the store, etc. So here's where in their really cool draggable widget here, where we have our Space Heater protocol. And yeah, Alex, if you want to talk more about that.
Sure. So yeah, as you can see, it's the same widget we just showed on our space capsule site. And if you can imagine, any host site could customize what types of things they want to happen in this space. So it could be things like pre-prompted questions, user flows, the certain data that might be available to the LLM to process in there, and then what kinds of user artifacts they might want to leverage in there. So it could be things like business plans or budgets or notes from associates about certain things that we want to incorporate into the answers and the responses from the LLM. And so that's really going to be something that we want to enable whatever host site to basically design and craft for their space and the user experience in that LLM. And as Ben was mentioning, the really important thing, we talk about things like auth tokens or, post messages and APIs, but really what that is just like, how do you sign into this thing and how do we make this user experience really seamless with the site that they're interacting with? And how do we keep that messaging of giving a user an enclosed shielded space where they can really leverage their own stuff? And I think that's going to be kind of a learning process for us as how we message it, but also as users use this, we're not going to ask them to like first put in the most sensitive things or let them leverage really sensitive data. It'll start with something small and you'll see how that got integrated into this space and understand that you were operating within your own sphere of privacy there. And so that's something that's going to be really important as we go forward with the Space Heater Space Capsule protocol, is like just people understanding, hey, I have this account that allows me to use certain data within these different LLM contexts wherever I happen to go. And I'm able to have some control over that. And it's all kind of within my own sphere of privacy. So with that said, let's see what's next. Oh, this is where it's kind of going beyond the iframe. And one of the things that we really are interested in pursuing and painting this picture of what Space Heater provides is it's not just a rendering on a iframe or something like that. It's really about a kind of in the cloud environment for LLMs and your own personal data. And so another way to kind of expose that is through a native app. And Ben has been working on an early native app that hooks into our system. And Ben, maybe you can talk a little bit about how this works.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a preliminary proof of concept, but you'll be able to see kind of what exactly we're shooting for. So you can see a very common chat interface right here. Also to appear, you'll notice this interesting dropdown. So just for the sake of this demo, here are three different contexts that I have for my Space Heater user. I have my family, I have my company, Space Heater AI, and then I have a private context just for me. And being able to switch back and forth through all these things is definitely an interesting case. So let's just do, first off, for this demo, let's just see what happens when I say, tell me 5 classic Italian dishes. And let's see, hopefully it'll give us some delicious stuff here. It's early for me here, but I'm sure this is going to make me hungry for some breakfast. So we have a good, classics, pizza margherita, spaghetti bolognese, all kinds of yummy stuff. Chicken parmesan, that sounds good, lasagna. So yeah, pretty good response here from our LLM. But what if we want something a little more personalized to us? So I'm in my private space just for me. Let's add some context about myself here, some stuff that you might, just some simple stuff that you might consider. So let's say I just really hate tomatoes, which is kind of a common dish, a common ingredient for Italian dishes. And then let's say maybe I love mushrooms. And then one final thing, what about I'm on a strict ketogenic diet. And yeah, low carb diets are great for those out there. I highly recommend. So now we just embedded that context in our Pinecone vector database for just my user. Nobody else can see it because it's mapped to just me. So now let's look at that response again from our LLM. So tell me 5 classic Italian dishes. So now it is actually pulling in what I just embedded into my user in our Pinecone vector database here. And you can see dietary restrictions. So now the results are different. So it's really, although I don't agree fettuccine Alfredo is low in carbs, but it's taking that into account and keto friendly. So you can see the data getting back is much more meaningful within the context of who I am, what's important to me, and all that stuff. So you can just imagine, by embedding different stuff in different contexts, your company, your family, your friend groups, different interests like surfing or whatever, you can see just how powerful that is with getting your private data mapped just to you, or mapped to your family or your company or your group, that all this stuff can be just super tailored to exactly what you're looking for.
And one of the things I want to add to that, when we think of spaces and environments that you might set up for a user experience, is now imagine if you're in a space that, potentially like a grocer or something like that, and they have certain brands or certain products that would be part of this recipe that they want to include as a dynamic part of the answer, or potentially like recipes or things like that. They can really instruct the model based on all kinds of various ideas or thoughts that might be coming through from the context that you bring in, to give you this really interesting kind of like we like to say, meet in the middle answer, where it's part of your data, part of your context, and part of theirs. And you can really design flows that address this. Maybe there's a sale on some certain ingredients for a mushroom dish that needs to get included into here. Maybe you're a shop owner and you're looking at your ad budget, and you've got some references from some of your employees that have added some context that can be taken into your marketing strategy or things like that. And so we really see this as a way to marry what's happening on a website somewhere or anywhere that the LLM might be served, with kind of running around wherever you happen to be. You open up the app, you talk to it, you give it an insight, and then later that can be referenced by your system. And as you can imagine, larger organizations might want to be selective over what data is included in their RAG system and gets leveraged later. And so, that'd be pretty simple to add a stopgap where certain people get to see the context that's going to be embedded first, and they either accept it or deny it. And so you can really gatekeep what's going in and out. And down the road, we see a way where you'll have a dashboard as an organization or whoever's hosting the space to really design, how it's going to look, what kind of data it's going to react to, what it's going to try and save for the user in their capsule after the experience, and all kinds of things like that, as well as portability flows back to the main site that'll be permissioned by the user. So, I actually kind of can envision when you go to a space, there's almost like a nutritional label of the space that kind of describes what's happening in this space. Okay, these are the game pieces and the context that'll be referenced in this space, and this is the kind of data that can go out of it with your permission. And this is, the intent of the space. And so really giving businesses or websites, whatever it may be, a lot of tools to leverage context from a lot of various places and do some amazing things with it with AI. And on that, I really wanted to, take a moment to speak with Angel and everybody out there about why we're doing these LinkedIn Lives and building in public. And as you can see, it's very early, it's very raw. We're showing you what we're trying to build, where we're stubbing our toes, hitting our heads, and then we're actually showing you how we're solving some of this stuff as well. And somebody might say, well, why are you building all this stuff and showing everybody how to do it? It can just be copied or whatever it may be. And really, the idea here is that we're learning. We're all learning. This stuff is moving really, really fast, and we see that this is the best way that we can expose what we're trying to do to people that might be interested in building similar technology, so that rather than seeing us as somebody that they want to copy, they might reach out and say, hey, we're interested in working on something like this with you guys, and we can collaborate and move quickly. Because there are so many people trying to solve these problems, and there's going to be a lot of different solutions on the table. And I think that the way to succeed with this is really by collaboration and openness. And to hand it off to Angel, like working with their team at Empathy and Open Innovation, I think that's what it's all about. And so, maybe you want to add to that, your thoughts.
I promise this just came to mind when I heard you saying that this is very early and it is very raw. You made me think of the metaphor of an open kitchen. And, I think it's a fair metaphor to make with building in public. Similar challenges, you can be too noisy or too overwhelming, but similar effects. You guys as the makers are being affected by the response. You are after that feedback, that community, also that accountability, that performance, that transparency, that engagement. So this is to be celebrated, and it's fantastic. Ben, the progress only in a couple of weeks is extraordinary. Another thing that comes to mind is that, you guys are advancing in a communication system, and this goes beyond an information system. And as such, you are reflecting with the notion of the space capsule and this enrichment of context. I love your example in there, Ben, an admirable example at your time in the morning. By the way, maybe that has influenced my thinking on a kitchen. But, the communication is all about the context. The context drives the quality, right? It sets the value of that communication, the value that's perceived on the receiver, the value that fires back into the sender, and being able to provide an intimate context. It's an incredible instrument to elicit a higher value on that communication system. And that's very exciting. I just can't stop thinking of you, because you guys are all these possibilities. When you are showing this example that you're specifying your preferences and then you're asking that particular question, there are many strategical preferences from a B2B case with relationships with third parties that are part of that conversation that elevate the context. And there are many specifically on the business to consumer or consumer to business, your allergies, your food preferences, your intolerances, your particular interests, religious, whatever, the way you want to communicate to a retailer that are important to you. Surely there's going to be a neutral space in a transaction, but it's all about that, giving that moment of intimacy that one can exercise in awareness. I see there is a question. how is experience guaranteed to be private? Does the user need to log in to the profile or something like that? Please go ahead. Ben, maybe you can unfold that.
Yeah, so there will be a login and authorization on our Space Heater side. So the users will be stored within our system. And again, all of the data is going to be private to that user or private to that organization, whatever context that the user selects for that information. And so none of it's going to be shared. That it's going to be shared only when the user is explicitly told. This is, potentially a case where you're doing a search or something where, we're going to have to do a search or send out a cart, what the user is going to buy. So it will be explicitly communicated what will be transmitted outside of their private neutral space. But yes, there will be a Space Heater user, Space Capsule user that will have all of the information stored on our side.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, the challenge around exposing information to a user, letting them visualize something in the context of something else. Right now, like we said, we're using iframes. There's definitely some security considerations that we're going to need to really clamp down and focus on how to do that the right way. We have some ideas about that. And, everybody I'm sure sees how fast everything is going. And you might think, well, in a couple of years, we aren't even going to be on smartphones anymore. We're going to have some completely different way of exposing ideas and information. Maybe it's a pin, maybe it's glasses, maybe it's a different kind of browser, maybe it's something that, I can't even think of what it might be. But the point is that there's going to be this space where the data is brought together under the sphere of your control. And then we're going to figure out ways and places that we can expose that to you under your control. And a big challenge around that in itself is we don't want to overwhelm users. We don't want them to have to check a bunch of boxes or read the 50-page legal doc on what data is going where when you do a certain thing. And so it's really we're going to have to be creative and work with a lot of people to figure out how we can make this system really flexible and really enable this sphere of privacy and control. And so we think right now we're starting in the simplest places, and that we can imagine at least, and with simple context and simple use cases. And as things grow, I know it'll get a lot more complex, but our goal is that it should always be understandable to the user, private to the user, and as secure as possible with any kind of computer system out there. As you know, there's always limitations to that, but we're going to do as much as we can to provide security.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. I mean, we run out of time. Of course, this is going to be in Spanish. Of course, we're going to release this in Backroom La Trastienda for the hundreds of customers as soon as we can. And yes, and we'll in Spanish. And we ambition also to be conversational voice input, being able to talk to your shop, being able to say on the move, can you tell me what are my categories that are not performing too well, where I have too much stock? And this interaction now that Ben has been and Alex explaining the invocation of the Stats API for insights, but we're also looking already into the Search API, being able to also exercise campaigns, exercise strategies. In cases of higher advancement and at enterprise level, being able to request evaluations, predictions, there is, limitless, so much more you can do. This is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So much to work on. I love the concept of building in public, and this is a development process. And thank you for the feedback. It's invaluable in providing a better product. So yeah, we go back to the kitchen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Look forward to seeing you guys again.
And
Have a great day.
Remember that you'll see us here again tomorrow.
Yes.
We have another session tomorrow, not with Space Heater, but still very cool on feedback loops and semantic search. So we hope to see you then.
Looking forward to that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You guys.
Thanks.
Guys, that's beautiful.